So the Cleveland Browns have a chance to turn their franchise around via the NFL draft, which is really the only way they can even try, considering they still have a certain quarterback under contract. Well, the good news is, based on recent reports, they could certainly take strides in the right direction by double dipping in round 1 and snagging current college teammates. So I've got to talk about that, some great players who recently retired, a bit of an Aaron Rodgers update, and more right after. Alright, first up, a couple of longtime NFL veterans announced their retirement recently, with the first one being wideout Julio Jones. And I'm not gonna lie, I kind of thought he already was retired because he didn't play at all last year. And the last time we saw him was in 2023 when the Eagles picked him up midway through the season and he caught 11 passes in 11 games. That's far from an accurate representation of his career because he has a good chance to wind up in Canton as a member of the Hall of Fame. 914 career receptions, 13,703 receiving yards, and 66 receiving touchdowns. Not bad at all for the former 6th overall pick. He's actually 16th all-time in career receiving yards, and his 2015 season, in which he had nearly 1,900 yards, is still the 3rd most receiving yards in a single season all-time. So shout out to Julio Jones for a great career, and also shout out to Terron Armstead because he too recently announced his retirement. He's been one of the best left tackles in the game over the past decade, making 5 Pro Bowls over his 12-year career. He spent his first 9 years in New Orleans with the Saints, then signed a nice 5-year, $75 million deal with Miami back in 2022. Then in February, so just a couple months ago, he actually restructured his contract, and that freed up $14 million in cap space for the Dolphins. The belief around that time was Armstead was likely going to retire anyway, so this certainly comes as no big surprise to the team. Something to note about Armstead, by the way, he actually still holds the record for the fastest 40 time by an offensive lineman in combine history with a 4.71. And I'm chuckling because that was actually faster than Tua's 4.7940, which is pretty wild to think about. But with Armstead retiring, Patrick Paul, that's Miami's 2nd round draft pick in the 2024 NFL draft and offensive tackle, he could be the next man up for the blindside protector of Tua Tagovailoa, as he logged over 2,700 snaps at left tackle in college. They also could look to the draft and take somebody with the 13th overall pick. And while they, of course, could move up, there could be some options for them right then and there, and it just depends on how the board falls out at the end of the day. Will Campbell, Armand Mimbu, Josh Simmons are definitely a few of the names to keep an eye out for on draft night. They also need interior help along the O-line, so while some have them taking a cornerback or maybe defensive lineman round 1 in recent mocks, you can't rule out an offensive lineman at this point in time either. Now, speaking of the draft, I wanted to talk about Colorado's recent pro day because a couple of the participants are going to play a huge role in how round 1 of the draft shakes out. Those two would obviously be quarterback Shedeur Sanders and wide receiver / cornerback, depending on how you see him, both Travis Hunter. Both of these guys have been mocked to the Browns at pick number 2, and with good reason. Cleveland obviously needs a quarterback, and with the Titans all but certainly taking Cam Ward 1st overall, Shedeur is going to be the next best quarterback on the board. In fact, the Titans actually canceled their private workouts with both Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders, so by all indications, they are going Cam Ward, pick 1. And that makes sense. So now let's look at Browns at number 2 and what they could do. Travis Hunter has the potential to be a generational talent, and they may not want to pass up on a chance to secure a guy like that at the 2nd overall pick. His success has been well documented. I mean, he obviously won the Heisman last year and is famous for not just playing on both sides of the ball, but being one of the best players in the country on both sides of the ball. Last season, he had 96 catches for over 1,200 yards and 15 touchdowns to go along with 11 passes defensed, 4 interceptions, and a forced fumble. This kid is an athletic freak, but some people around the NFL have raised concerns about him being able to play both sides of the ball in the pros. He led the FBS in snaps per game in both 2023 and 2024. Well, the concern there is that he won't be able to sustain that in the NFL, and it could lead to injuries down the road. He himself has made it known, though, that he intends on playing both ways, despite the doubts that some people have. There's been some thought of, hey, what if he specializes in one position, say cornerback, and then came in on certain packages on the offense. Well, that seemed like it was the most likely scenario to play out. However, during Colorado's pro day on Friday, surprisingly, Travis did not participate in any defensive back drills. He actually chose to run routes and catch passes from Shedeur Sanders. So if that's any indication, it seems like he plans on operating primarily as a receiver first. Adam Schefter today said he thinks Cleveland may think of Hunter more as a receiver than a cornerback. Regardless, it seems like Travis Hunter going to Cleveland at number 2 is definitely gaining some steam. Jeff Howe of The Atlantic reported that there is a growing belief around the league that Travis Hunter is the favorite to be taken 2nd overall. So let's say the Browns do actually do that. Who the heck is going to be throwing in passes? Deshaun Watson is likely to miss the entire 2025 season after rupturing his Achilles again, re-tearing it during his recovery. Kirk Cousins has been floated out as a potential trade option, and it makes sense considering he and Kevin Stefanski had success together in Minnesota when Stefanski was the OC there. They did trade for Kenny Pickett, and Pickett himself said he believes he will have a chance to start. So I guess that is an option, but I personally do like the Kirk Cousins route above that one. Does a potential trade to Cleveland happen on draft night? If so, that definitely makes sense. But what about this idea? What if they took Travis Hunter at 2 and then traded back into the first round using several of their later picks to go and get Shedeur Sanders as well? I've seen that happen in a bunch of mock drafts, and again, makes sense. They have their 2nd round pick and 2/3 to work with this year, then obviously can throw in future picks as well. They're probably going to be picking high in the draft for the next couple of years, so these would definitely be some valuable picks to get your hands on. The question is, how far would they actually need to trade up into round 1 to get the deal done? The Giants are right behind them at 3, and even though they signed Russell Wilson and Famous Jameis this offseason, they don't actually have a long-term answer at the quarterback position. However, with Brian Daboll and Joe Shane both on the hot seat, they may be more motivated to draft a player that can help them win now, say defensive end Abdul Carter or even Will Campbell, who I mentioned earlier as one of the best offensive linemen in this class. If that were to happen, it's not until pick 9 that we see another team who could be needing a quarterback, and that would be the Saints. Trading for the 7th or 8th overall pick would require some serious draft capital out of Cleveland, but it would definitely be a lot easier than trading for the 3rd pick. The Saints taking Sanders at pick 9 is gaining steam in recent mocks, even though Carr has a couple years left on his contract. I've also seen Cleveland trading up to pick 15, so Sanders fell all the way to 15, and even up to pick 24 for Sanders and other mocks. As you can tell, it's obviously very dependent on how the board ends up falling. Still, the idea of Cleveland drafting both of these guys isn't too far-fetched. A lot of their leadership was in Colorado for their pro day. They reportedly hosted both Shedeur and Travis to a private dinner, with Dion also being in attendance. Owner Jimmy Haslam was also there, and it's been reported that he met with Dion personally. But what do you guys think? Should Cleveland get both of these guys? How do you think that could end up playing out as far as where you could actually get Shedeur Sanders if you opted for Travis Hunter at pick 2? Let me know your thoughts on that in the comments below. Next up, with the NCAA tournament coming to a close, the Panthers were feeling inspired, and so they decided to sign a college basketball player. That's right. They signed former D1 basketball player Colin Granger as a tight end. He's a whopping 6'8", 245 pounds. So an absolute unit, to say the least. The reason he was able to be signed right away and not have to wait until after the draft as a UDFA, by the way, is because he's actually 5 years removed from high school. This definitely isn't the first time a college basketball player has gone pro in the NFL as a tight end either. Tony Gonzalez, Antonio Gates, and Jimmy Graham all played basketball in college. Not saying he's going to end up like 3 of the greatest tight ends to ever play the game, but it is an intriguing thing to say the least. The only thing with Granger is that he hasn't played football since 8th grade, so we'll see if he can get up to speed quick enough to make the roster, but I'll definitely be rooting for him as it's a pretty cool story. And then in some more player news, the Raiders released veteran cornerback Jack Jones. They traded for him in 2023, and he played pretty well for them that season, actually recording 2 pick-6s in his 7 games with the team. He took a clear step back in 2024, missing more tackles than any corner on the roster, and he also gave up 10 touchdowns in coverage. Yes, 10. That was tied for the worst in the NFL with Cam Taylor-Britt. Basically, with Jack Jones, you get the highest of highs or the lowest of lows, and the Raiders are deciding to move on. Still, though, at just 27 years old, I'm sure there's going to be multiple suitors out there at least willing to take a flyer on Jack Jones. Now, there does not appear to be multiple suitors for Aaron Rodgers. Ian Rappaport appeared on the Pat McAfee show today, and he said what we kind of already knew, which is, quote, the Vikings are as out as they could be right now on Aaron Rodgers. He then went on to say that he'd be very surprised if he didn't sign with the Steelers, and said he'd also be surprised if Rodgers waited until after the draft to do so. It seems like the only thing that would hold him back from playing at this point is retirement, though that doesn't appear likely, according to Rappaport himself. So sadly, Aaron Rodgers' watch will continue to go on for as long as he wants to drag this whole process out, but if he's holding out hopes that he'll be able to land in Minnesota with the Vikings, with each passing day, it seems like they are less interested and are going to be rolling with J.J. McCarthy. And then I did want to mention that teams who have a first-year head coach were able to begin their voluntary offseason workouts today. That's April 7th. Every other team will start theirs in a couple weeks, but teams like the Patriots, Jets, Bears, and so on and so forth will be able to get a little bit of jump on things. Doesn't really mean a whole lot in the grand scheme, but it is one step closer to getting prepared for the 2025 NFL season that still seems very far away. But hey, that's going to do it for me today, and with that, I'll see y'all next time.